When the doctor told me I had only a few months to live, I faked my own death to see my family's reactions. But what I discovered at my funeral shattered my heart into pieces. My name is Margaret Williams, but everyone calls me Grandma Maggie. I am 72 years old, and I have lived long enough to know that family love can sometimes be the sweetest blessing, and sometimes the sharpest knife. The doctor told me on a cold Friday morning, with his eyes lowered and his hands folded, that I only had a few months to live. My heart thudded in my chest, not just because of the sickness inside me, but because of the sudden thought that rushed to my mind. How will my family treat me when I am gone? I had given my children everything. I worked 2 jobs after my husband passed just to raise them. I cooked, I prayed, I even helped each of them buy their first homes. And my daughters-in-law, well, I treated them like my own blood, even when they whispered sharp words about me behind my back. So when the doctor's words sank in, I felt a strange idea creep into my mind, an idea that would let me see the truth. I decided to fake my own death. Not forever, just for long enough to see how my children and daughters-in-law would react at my funeral. Would they cry for me? Would they miss me? Or would they finally reveal the secret faces they had always hidden? The day of my funeral came faster than I expected. The church smelled of lilies and polished wood. My picture, framed in gold, sat by a closed casket. My children sat in the front rows, their wives by their sides, dressed in black. From where I was hiding, up in the choir loft, I could see them all. My heart pounded. So hard, I thought the whole church might hear it. At first, I saw tears. My eldest son, Daniel, wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. His wife, Clara, held his arm gently. My second son, Michael, shook his head slowly, his jaw tight. But then something strange happened. When the pastor called for moments of remembrance, Clara leaned over to my daughter-in-law, Jenny, and whispered words that made my blood run cold. At least now, we don't have to deal with her old house. The lawyer said, Daniel, and I can sell it quickly once it's transferred. Jenny smirked. Lucky you. I told Michael the same thing. She was holding on too long. Finally, we'll get what we deserve. They weren't crying for me. They were smiling for themselves. Then I saw my youngest son, David, who had always been the gentle one. He sat in silence, his hands shaking, his eyes red and swollen. His wife, however, tapped his knee and whispered harshly, Stop pretending. You know, she never liked me. Once this is over, we can finally redo the house the way I want. I gripped the railing so tight my knuckles went white. My heart cracked open. These were the women I had cooked for, prayed for, hugged as if they were my own daughters. And here they were at my funeral, treating me like I was nothing more than a key to money and property. And then the worst blow came. I watched Daniel stand, clear his throat, and with dry eyes he said, Mother was a good woman. Strict, yes, but good. She did her best. He paused. Then his lips curved into a faint smile. But now we can move forward in peace. Move forward in peace. Those words sliced through me like a knife. Peace, to them, meant freedom from me. Peace meant money, houses, and no more old grandma to bother them. My chest tightened as I realized I had given them everything, and in return, they were celebrating my death. But they didn't know one thing. I wasn't dead. And when the truth came out, when I finally revealed myself, they would learn what it meant to break a grandmother's heart. The hymn swelled. The daughters-in-law leaned close, already planning what to do once I was gone for good. My children stayed quiet, blinded by their wives' smiles. And just as the pastor lifted his hands for prayer, I saw something that froze me completely. Clara pulled out a folded document from her purse. It had my name on it, and across the top, Bold letters read, "Last Will and Testament." But I had never signed such a paper. The folded paper slipped halfway out of Clara's purse, just enough for the gold light from the stained glass windows to catch on the bold letters, "Last Will and Testament of Margaret Williams." My knees went weak. My heart pounded so hard I had to cover my mouth to keep from gasping. I had never signed any new will. The last time I had updated my papers was 6 years ago, and I left my house equally to all three of my sons. So why was my eldest son's wife clutching a will at my funeral? Clara leaned close to Daniel, nudging the paper toward him under the hymnal book. He gave her a sharp glance, the kind a husband gives when he's nervous about being seen. But she whispered something in his ear, and his shoulders relaxed. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read his lips. "It looks real." She nodded, lips curving in the faintest smile. That was when Jenny, my second daughter-in-law, turned slightly in her seat and whispered, "Did you bring it?" Clara gave the smallest nod, and Jenny's eyes flickered with greedy approval. "Perfect. Once it's filed, there's no going back." Filed. Filed where? My will was already filed at the courthouse downtown. The only way they could pull this off was with forgery, a fake, a stolen signature. My own children's wives plotting to erase everything I had worked for. The pastor's voice floated over the crowd like honey. "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away." But all I could think was, no, not like this. They are not going to take everything I built with my bare hands and my broken back. From my hiding place in the choir loft, I scanned the pews. My youngest son, David, still looked broken, his face streaked with tears. He had not spoken a word, and his wife sat stiff beside him, lips pressed thin. She looked annoyed at his sadness, not moved by it. Then, as if the world wanted to confirm my worst fears, David's wife leaned over and muttered, "You'll see. Once they sell her house, we'll finally have enough to move into something better. No more waiting." David shook his head, whispering back, "She's not even cold in the ground yet." "Exactly," she said, her voice icy. "So stop crying. Crying doesn't buy houses." I bit down on my hand to stop myself from crying out. How could they say such words in the same church where my picture sat smiling beside a coffin? Then, an even more chilling scene unfolded. Clara's hand slid into Daniel's again, and Jenny leaned across the aisle toward them. The three of them shared a glance. It was subtle, but I knew that look. It was a pact, a silent agreement that bound them closer than family bonds ever could. And as if fate wanted to hammer the nail deeper into my chest, I caught sight of Michael, my second son, my quiet one, my steady one. He leaned into Jenny's shoulder, his face expressionless, and she patted his hand with a smile that was too smug, too satisfied. He wasn't stopping her. He wasn't stopping Clara. He was letting it all happen. The organ played softly, people bowed their heads, and all I could feel was betrayal burning in my bones. That was when the pastor raised his hand and said, "Before we close, Daniel has something he would like to share with the family." My eldest son stood slowly, and Clara slipped the folded paper deeper into his hand. He cleared his throat, his voice steady in a way that froze my blood. My mother was a strong woman, Daniel said, eyes sweeping the pews. And because she loved us so much, she made sure her final wishes were clear. I gripped the railing so hard I thought the wood might snap. Final wishes? Everyone leaned forward. My mother, my children's grandmother, looked confused, clutching her tissue. David lifted his head, eyes red, staring at his brother in disbelief. Daniel unfolded the paper. The sound of it crackling echoed through the quiet chapel like thunder, and with a calmness that made me sick, he began to read. "This is the last will and testament of Margaret Williams." But those weren't my words. Those weren't my wishes. It was a forgery written by hands that once ate at my table, kissed my cheek, and called me Mom. And now they were erasing me while I was still alive. I felt my breath hitch, my whole body trembling. Nora, my old friend from church, who had helped me sneak into the loft, looked up from the back pew. Her eyes widened when she saw the paper, then darted toward me as though she could hear my heart breaking from where she sat. I wasn't sure if she would rise and stop him. I wasn't sure if I wanted her to, because deep inside, a fire began to burn. If they wanted to steal my life before I was even gone, then I would make sure my revenge was something they'd never forget. And it would start today. Daniel's voice carried through the church with the smoothness of a man who thought he had already won. "This is the last will and testament of Margaret Williams," he read, his tone firm, commanding. "I, Margaret Williams, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath my estate." Every pair of eyes in the church locked on him. My mother's sister dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A neighbor shook her head sadly. Even the pastor leaned forward, as though the words were sacred. But to me, hiding above in the choir loft, those words were poison. I leave my house and all its contents to my eldest son, Daniel, and his wife, Clara. Daniel read, glancing briefly at his wife before continuing. "To my second son, Michael, and his wife, Jenny, I leave my farmland property in Franklin County. To my youngest son, David, I leave a small trust account to support him and his children as needed." The church gasped. It wasn't just what he read, it was how he read it. Calm, sure, as though I had actually sat down and given Clara and Jenny everything, while tossing David, the only one who truly loved me, scraps. My heart ached so badly, I had to grip the railing to stay steady. David's head shot up, his face pale. "What?" he whispered. His voice cracked, echoing faintly in the church. Jenny squeezed his knee. "Shoo," she hissed. "Don't embarrass us." He jerked his leg away, his eyes burning with disbelief. "That's not her will," he whispered again, louder this time. But Daniel ignored him. He went on, reading each word carefully, as if the ink had been etched by my own trembling hand. "And finally, I appoint Daniel Williams as the sole executor of this estate, with full authority to manage all decisions without contest." That was the killing blow. Gasps filled the church again. My friends, people who had known me for decades, shifted in their seats. Some looked confused, others suspicious, but most simply nodded as if they had to accept what was written. After all, the words were on paper. My stomach turned. They forged my signature. They made me sound like a cruel old woman who cared only for the eldest and the ones who could give me something in return. The pastor cleared his throat. "Well, thank you, Daniel, for honoring your mother's wishes." "No." David's voice cracked, loud and trembling. He stood, fists clenched at his sides. "That's not her handwriting. That's not even her voice. My mother would never, never leave me nothing but scraps. She loved us equally." Jenny tugged his arm, her face red with embarrassment. "Sit down, David," she whispered sharply. "You're making a fool of yourself." But David wouldn't sit. His tears glistened in the candlelight. "I know my mother. She wasn't perfect, but she was fair. And this," he pointed at the paper in Daniel's hand. "This is a lie." The church grew restless, people whispering, exchanging glances. Nora, bless her soul, was watching everything closely from the back pew, her lips pressed tight. She knew. Daniel sighed dramatically, shaking his head. "Grief does strange things, little brother. We all loved her, but we must honor what she wanted. She didn't want this." David's voice shook with rage. His whole body trembled as if the ground itself betrayed him. And then, as if to drive the knife even deeper into his heart, Clara spoke. "David, it's time to accept reality. Your mother cared for you, yes, but she wanted Daniel and Michael to take responsibility. You've always struggled. She wanted to make sure the family legacy was safe in capable hands. Capable hands. My breath hitched. How dare she speak those words in my name? David's shoulders fell. He looked around the church desperately, searching for someone, anyone, to stand with him. But silence met him. Silence, and the sound of Jenny tugging his sleeve, whispering, "Enough already." And that was when it hit me, harder than the doctor's words, harder than the sight of Clara and Jenny smirking at my funeral. David was the only one who truly loved me, and they were breaking him right there, in the same pew where he sat to say goodbye. Tears welled in my eyes. Anger burned in my chest. My children's wives were smiling. My eldest was lying through his teeth. My second was quietly complicit. And my youngest was being humiliated for defending me. I pressed my palm flat against the wooden railing, whispering to myself, "They think I'm dead. They think I can't fight back. But they're wrong. So very wrong." The pastor closed his Bible with a soft thud. "Let us now pray for the family's healing," he said. But before he could bow his head, I saw something that made my stomach lurch. Clara reached for Daniel's hand again, but this time, instead of a loving squeeze, she slid something small and shiny into his palm. A house key, the key to my home. She had already taken it. The rage inside me burned so hot, I nearly stood up right there in the loft and shouted. My family would see I was alive. They would hear me expose their lies, their forgery, their greed. But then I froze, because at that exact moment, Nora, sitting at the back of the church, lifted her eyes and met mine. She saw me, and this time her lips moved. Not yet. Her eyes said everything. Wait, watch, collect everything, then strike. The hymn began. The church filled with voices. The forged will lay across Daniel's lap. The house key glinted between Clara's fingers. My youngest son sat broken, head bowed in defeat. And I, still hidden, still breathing, knew this was only the beginning. The family thought they had buried me, but what they really buried was their chance at mercy. The hymn ended with a final low hum of the organ, but my ears rang with something far louder, the lies echoing through that church. People rose to leave, hugging, whispering condolences to my children, shaking hands with my daughters-in-law. To the rest of the world, it looked like a family united in grief. But I knew better. I had seen the smirks. I had seen the forged will. I had seen the key to my home slip into Clara's greedy hand. I stayed hidden as the pews emptied. My legs trembled, but my heart burned with a fire I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was gone. They thought they could carve up my life like a pie, leaving crumbs for the one son who loved me and serving full plates to the ones who smiled at my death. Not yet, I told myself. Nora was right. This wasn't the moment to rise from the dead. Not yet. The game had only begun. From the loft, I watched Daniel and Clara gather people around them like royalty greeting loyal subjects. Clara laughed, loud and warm, as though she wasn't clutching stolen property in her purse. Jenny stayed close to Michael, whispering in his ear. David lingered behind, his head bowed, shoulders heavy. His wife tugged his arm toward the door, her face twisted in irritation, as if she were embarrassed to be married to a man who cried for his mother. My chest tightened. If anyone deserved justice, it was David. If anyone deserved to see the truth revealed, it was him. I slipped out the back stairwell as the reception began in the fellowship hall. The smell of casseroles drifted through the hallway, mingling with laughter that sounded far too cheerful for a funeral. My stomach churned. Nora was waiting for me in the parking lot. She had her black shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, but her eyes sparkled with something fierce. You saw it too, I whispered, She nodded. The will. The key. All of it. They forged my name, Nora. They're stealing everything. And they're sloppy, she said. Clara waving papers in front of half the church. Jenny whispering like no one could hear her. If you play this right, you'll have more witnesses than you need. I shook my head, my throat tight. I wanted to see who loved me. Now I know. Only David. And they're tearing him apart for it. Nora touched my hand. Then make him your ally. Quietly. He's the one who'll stand with you when the storm comes. I nodded, wiping my eyes. But how? If I show myself too soon, they'll destroy the evidence. They'll turn it all against me. Her lips curved into a thin smile. Then we let them dig their own grave. You stay hidden. I'll keep watch. And when they try to cash in on your death, we'll be ready. The air outside the church was sharp and cool, but my blood boiled hot. For 72 years, I had carried my family, and now they carried daggers in their smiles. I wasn't about to let them win. That night, I stayed at Nora's house, hidden in her spare room with the curtains drawn. We sipped tea in silence until the clock struck midnight. Then she handed me her phone. Listen, she said. It was a recording. She had turned it on during the reception in the fellowship hall. The audio was muffled at first, filled with clinking dishes and laughter. But then came Clara's voice, sharp and triumphant. Tomorrow we'll meet the lawyer. Once it's signed and filed, the house is ours. Finally, all those years of her bossing us around will pay off. Jenny laughed in reply. She thought she was so clever, treating us like daughters. She had no idea. Then Michael's voice, low and hesitant. Are you sure no one will question it? Of course not, Clara snapped. She's dead. Who's going to argue with us? David? Please. He can barely argue with his wife. The women laughed. The sound cut through me like glass. I pressed my hand to my chest, forcing myself to breathe. Every word confirmed the truth. They weren't grieving me. They were celebrating their victory. But they were wrong, because I was still alive, and I was going to make sure their victory turned into their downfall. The next morning, Nora drove me past my own house. My house. The garden I planted. The porch swing where I'd read bedtime stories to my grandchildren. The windows I had washed every spring. And there, in my driveway, was Daniel's car. Clara stood on the porch, jingling my house key in her hand like a prize. Jenny leaned against the railing, sipping coffee, her smile smug. Michael was carrying boxes out of the trunk. They weren't even waiting. They were moving in. My blood roared in my ears. They'll touch everything, I whispered. They'll tear through my closets, throw away my things like garbage, sell my memories for cash. Nora's jaw tightened. Then let them. The deeper they dig, the more guilty they'll look. We'll gather proof. And when the time comes, you'll have everything you need to ruin them. I stared at the house, my sanctuary. My heart broke with every laugh that floated from the porch. But my rage was stronger. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. But first, I had to bide my time. And then, as if fate wanted to test me, I saw something that nearly made me fling the car door open. Clara stepped inside my living room, her voice ringing out as she announced to Jenny, "This will look so much better once we get rid of all her old junk. Tomorrow, we start clearing it out. My old junk, my life, my memories." And sitting on that porch swing, Jenny pulled out the forged will and waved it in the air. "By tomorrow night," she said, laughing, "it'll all be official." My chest heaved. My fingers curled into fists. But Nora's hand pressed down on mine. "Not yet, Maggie. Let them think they've won." Her eyes gleamed like steel. "Because when you strike back, you'll take everything from them." The next day, I sat by Nora's window with the curtains drawn, watching the clock tick by like it was mocking me. Every second felt heavier than the last, because I knew, at that exact moment, my daughters-in-law were inside my home, tearing apart everything I had built. Nora came in with her phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call and looked at me with a grim smile. "They're there now. Clara ordered a moving truck to come tomorrow. They're not even pretending to wait for the paperwork." My throat burned. "They'll throw out my memories. Nora, my husband's war medals, my wedding photos, my recipe books. They'll toss them into trash bags and call it clutter." Her eyes narrowed. "Then we make sure every step they take is recorded, and every word they speak becomes evidence." That afternoon, we parked down the street in Nora's car, windows cracked just enough to hear faint voices drifting from my porch. Through the binoculars Nora kept in her glove box, left over from birdwatching days, I saw Clara marching in and out with boxes. Jenny followed close behind, her heels clacking like gunshots against my wooden floor. Then I saw something that turned my stomach to stone. Michael, my quiet, obedient son, was carrying out a box labeled in my handwriting, "Family photos, keep safe." He handed it to Jenny, who laughed. "We don't need these. Who wants to look at old faces when we can remodel the whole house fresh?" I nearly opened the car door right then, but Nora's firm hand on my arm held me back. "Patience, Maggie. Let them reveal themselves fully. We'll catch every word." Sure enough, as we leaned closer, Clara's voice rang clear from the open front door. "Daniel and I have the will. By tomorrow, the lawyer will file it. Once the house is officially ours, everything inside belongs to us. Get rid of whatever you want." I tapped my pen against the paper. "Then we start gathering. Recordings, witnesses, anything that shows what they've done." Nora nodded. "I'll help. I've got a tape recorder. We can hide it in your house." That evening, we parked down the block again. Through the windows, I saw them all sitting around my dining table, the same table where I'd served Christmas dinners. Only now it was covered with papers, wine glasses, and my old trunk lying on its side like a gutted animal. Clara was at the head, holding the forged will like a queen with her scepter. Jenny leaned over, pointing at my original documents, spreading them out like cards in a game. Michael sat quietly, drinking from his glass, his eyes fixed on the table. And Daniel, my Daniel, looked proud, smug even, as though he were finally wearing a crown he thought was owed to him. "Tomorrow," Clara said loudly enough for us to hear from the porch, "we'll go to the lawyer and finalize it. Once that's done, the house, the land, all of it, it's ours." Jenny laughed, swirling her wine. "David will be furious, but what can he do? Without proof, he's nothing." Proof. That was what I needed. Nora squeezed my hand. "Now's our chance." We crept around the side of the house. With trembling fingers, I slid the tape recorder under the open window of my dining room. Their voices carried perfectly. Every lie, every scheme, every selfish word was captured on that little machine. Then something happened that made my heart stop. Michael spoke. For the first time all night, his voice was steady, cold. "We need to get rid of the trunk completely. Burn it tonight. If anyone ever finds those old documents, we're finished." Clara grinned. "Then we'll have a bonfire. Fitting, don't you think? Maggie's life going up in flames." Laughter filled the room. My blood boiled. I wanted to storm inside and scream at them, but Nora's grip on my arm was iron. "Let them. The more they talk, the deeper they bury themselves." She was right. Every cruel word was another nail in their coffin. And then Jenny leaned back in her chair, smirking. Imagine if she were still alive to see this. She'd keel over all over again. They roared with laughter. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. But beneath the pain, something stronger rose. Not sadness, not even rage. Power, because they had no idea I was alive. No idea I was listening. No idea every word was being recorded. By the time they were finished, I wouldn't just take back my house and my dignity. I would take everything they thought they had stolen. Later that night, back at Nora's, we replayed the recording. Every word was clear. Every lie, every laugh, every plan. Nora set the recorder down and looked at me, her eyes fierce. "This is it, Maggie. This is your weapon." I nodded, clutching the notepad, where I'd started drafting a fake, new will designed to bait them further. They wanted ashes. Now I'll give them a fire so big it'll scorch their names forever. And just as I spoke those words, Nora's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, then turned pale. "It's David," she whispered. "He's at your house. He must have gone there to confront them." My heart jumped into my throat. No, he doesn't know how dangerous they are. I grabbed my coat, adrenaline flooding my veins. We have to get him out of there before they destroy him too. We rushed for the door, the night air sharp and cold. Because if they were willing to burn my life's memories, what would they do to the only son who still loved me? The tires screeched as Nora's car swung onto Maple Street. My heart hammered. So hard, I thought it might break my ribs. Through the windshield, I saw the glow of fire. Not a full blaze, but flickers of orange through the open garage door. Smoke curling into the night sky. "They're burning it," I whispered, my throat tight. "They're burning my trunk." But then I saw something worse. David's car sat crooked at the curb. His door was wide open. Nora slammed the brakes. And before the car stopped fully, I threw the door open and stumbled out, my legs trembling but moving faster than they had in years. From the driveway, I heard shouting. David's voice, raw with anger. "You're lying. All of you," he screamed. Clara's sharp laugh cut through the smoke. "Stop acting like a child. David, your mother left you nothing. Accept it. She would never do that." His voice cracked. I was the only one who... Then Daniel's voice, cold and commanding. "Enough. You're embarrassing yourself. Go home before we call the cops." I crept closer, hiding in the shadows by the porch. Nora stayed behind me, silent, her phone in her hand, recording everything. Inside the garage, the fire danced in a metal barrel. Michael stood beside it, tossing papers in like he was feeding a beast. My husband's war medals, my photo albums, my recipe cards, all swallowed by flames. And there, on the floor beside them, was my trunk, empty now, its cedar frame cracked open like a coffin. David tried to push past them, reaching for the papers, but Daniel shoved him hard against the wall. "Stay out of it, little brother. You're too weak to understand how the real world works." David staggered, but he didn't fall. His fists shook. "No, I'm not weak. I just loved her. Something you'll never understand." My chest ached with pride and pain all at once. Clara smirked, stepping closer to him. "Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't get you a house. Grow up, David. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." And then Jenny, her voice dripping with venom. "Honestly, I'm glad she's gone. The old woman was always in the way. At least now we can live without her shadow hanging over us." I gasped before I could stop myself. The sound carried. Head snapped toward the driveway. Daniel squinted into the darkness. "Who's there?" he barked. Nora's hand clamped down on my arm, but it was too late. I stepped forward, my breath fogging in the cold air. "It's me," I said, my voice trembling, but loud enough for them all to hear. The firelight flickered across their faces, freezing their expressions in masks of horror. Clara's mouth fell open. Jenny dropped her wine glass, the shatter echoing through the garage. Michael stumbled back, his face pale. And Daniel, my eldest son, stared at me as if he were seeing a ghost. Mom, he whispered, his voice cracking. I stepped closer, my shadow stretching across the driveway, the flames painting me in gold and red. Yes, Daniel, your mother, the one you thought you buried, the one you tried to erase. David turned, his eyes wide, tears streaking down his cheeks. Mom, you're alive. I nodded, my chest tightening. Yes, sweetheart, I'm alive. And I've seen everything. Clara recovered first. She straightened, her lips curling into a sneer. This is impossible. You're supposed to be dead. We saw the funeral. I cut her off, my voice sharp as steel. You saw what I wanted you to see, and it showed me exactly who you are. Jenny stepped back, shaking her head. This changes nothing. The will is a forgery. I snapped. I know it, and soon the whole world will know it too. Nora stepped into the light, then, holding up her phone. I recorded everything. Every word you just said. Every cruel laugh. Every plan to burn her life to the ground. It's all here. Their faces drained of color. For the first time, the power shifted. Daniel's hand shook as he pointed at me. You don't understand, Mom. We were just trying to... To what? I roared, my voice echoing through the night. Steal from me? Betray me? Burn me out of existence? I gave you everything, and you repaid me with ashes. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks into the air. The sound made them all flinch. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on theirs. But you forgot one thing. The dead can't fight back. And I'm not dead. The night fell silent, except for the crackle of flames. David moved to my side, his shoulders shaking, his hand reaching for mine. And then, from behind the group, Michael whispered something that made the others spin toward him in shock. She's right. We went too far. The fire crackled like it was listening, waiting for the next word to fall into its hungry mouth. Michael stood there, his shoulders hunched, his hands trembling at his sides. His eyes darted between me and the barrel, where the last scraps of my life turned to smoke. He swallowed hard. She's right, he said again, louder this time. We went too far. Clara spun on him, her eyes blazing. Shut up, Michael. Don't you dare turn on us now. Jenny grabbed his arm. Think about what you're saying. If you admit anything, we all go down together. But Michael pulled away, his face pale with shame. I never wanted this. I just wanted peace. But you, he pointed at Clara and Jenny, his voice cracking. You turned it into greed. You made me destroy her things, her memories, like they were trash. And Daniel, his gaze shifted to his brother. You let them. Daniel's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, towering over his younger brother. You're weak, Michael. Always have been. If you can't stomach reality, then stay out of it. This family needs strength, not whining. Strength. My voice cut through the night, sharper than the sparks leaping from the flames. You call this strength, Daniel? Forging papers, stealing keys, burning what you didn't build? No, this isn't strength. It's cowardice dressed as pride. David's grip tightened on my hand, his voice shaking but steady. She's telling the truth. I knew it. I knew something was wrong. Tears welled in his eyes as he turned to his brothers. All I wanted was for us to stand together, to grieve her, to remember her. But you, his voice broke. You were celebrating her death. Clara laughed bitterly, though her voice trembled. Enough of this act. You're all fools. It doesn't matter what she says now. She's sick. She's dying anyway. The house, the money, it will be ours. Everyone knows the will is real. Nora stepped forward, holding up her phone. Her voice was calm but deadly. Everyone will know this is real too. She pressed play, and the recording filled the night air. Jenny's laughter echoed first. She thought she was so clever, treating us like daughters. She had no idea. Then Clara's voice, sharp and smug. Tomorrow we'll meet the lawyer. Once it's signed and filed, the house is ours. And finally, Michael's own words. If anyone ever finds those old documents, we're finished. The blood drained from their faces. Neighbors' porch lights flicked on up and down the street. Curtains shifted. People were listening. I stepped forward, my shadow stretching across the driveway, the firelight dancing in my eyes. You wanted to bury me, but now it's your turn. Every neighbor here heard your voices. The police will hear them too. And when the judge asks for proof of forgery, I'll hand them the ashes you made tonight. Daniel's face twisted with rage. You can't do this. You're my mother. Yes, I said coldly. And that's the only reason I haven't called the police already. But make no mistake, you're done. All of you. Clara's voice cracked as she turned to Daniel. Do something. Stop her. But for the first time, Daniel looked uncertain. His shoulders slumped as he stared at me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a little boy again, the one I once rocked to sleep after his nightmares, the boy who was long gone, replaced by a man blinded by greed. Michael dropped his head, silent tears streaking his face. Jenny's lips pressed tight, fury and fear warring in her eyes. Clara's face hardened, but her hands shook. And then David stepped forward, his voice steady, strong. Mom, come home. Come home with me. Let me take care of you, the way you always took care of us. My chest ached, but for the first time in days, it was from love, not betrayal. I turned to the others, my voice sharp as a knife. Listen well. You've shown me what you are. Greedy, cruel, faithless. And you will live with the shame of the truth being known. Every neighbor will whisper your names. Every eye will see you for what you are. And when the law comes for you, don't expect me to lift a finger. Silence fell, heavy and final. I turned away from the fire, the barrel still spitting sparks behind me. David's arm wrapped around my shoulders as we walked down the driveway together. Nora followed close, her phone still recording, her eyes blazing with triumph. At the curb, I paused and looked back one last time. Daniel stood frozen, his face pale. Clara shook her head, muttering under her breath. Jenny clutched her purse like it could save her. Michael sat down on the curb, his face in his hands, broken. The fire behind them hissed and popped, the last pieces of my old life turning to smoke. But I wasn't ashes. I was alive. And now, with the truth on my side, I was free. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about letting them destroy themselves while you stand stronger than ever in the ashes they left behind.